pure experiences.
Welcome to the Pure Experiences Podcasts. Everything exists as vibrations. The mental phenomena are just higher vibrations compared to the material. Understanding of vibrations brings powers. Everything has opposites, and they are simply different degrees of the same thing, appearing as two poles of it. This understanding enables us to transmute that thing into something of a higher vibration. The most important application of which is transmutation of our own mind.
The vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The Kybalion. The great third hermetic principle, the principle of vibration, embodies the truth that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing is at rest, that everything moves, vibrates and circles. This hermetic principle was recognized by some of the early Greek philosophers who embodied it in their systems. But then for centuries it was lost sight of by the thinkers outside of the hermetic ranks. But in the 19th century, physical science rediscovered the truth, and the 20th century scientific discoveries have added additional proof of the correctness and truth of this centuries-old hermetic doctrine. The hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, but that even the all in itself manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered as at rest. The teachers directing the attention of the students to the fact that even on the physical plane, a rapidly moving object, such as a revolving wheel, seems to be at rest. The teachings are to the effect that spirit is at one end of the pole of vibration, and other pole being certain extremely gross forms of matter. Between these two poles are millions upon millions of different rates and modes of vibration. Modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion, and some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving towards the position of the occultists, who hold that the phenomena of mind are likewise modes of vibration or motion. Let us see what science has to say regarding the question of vibrations in matter and energy. In the first place, science teaches that all matter manifests in some degree the vibrations arising from temperature or heat, but an object, cold or hot, both being degrees of the same thing, it manifests certain heat vibrations, and in that sense is in motion and vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular movement, from corpuscles to suns. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axis. The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on ad infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which likewise are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes called electrons, ions, etc., which also are in a state of rapid motion, revolving around each other, and which manifest a very rapid state of mode of vibration. And so we see that all forms of matter manifest vibration in accordance with the hermetic principle of vibration. And this is the basic elementary physics stuff which everybody knows, that everything is in motion. In Indian philosophical terms, we say all experience is changing. Everything that can be experienced is in motion. Change is the only constant, and so on. So this is very, very elementary. So let us move forward. And so it is with the various forms of energy. Science teaches that light, heat, magnetism, and electricity are but forms of vibratory motion connected in some way with and probably emanating from the ether. Science does not yet attempt to explain the nature of the phenomena known as cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three, which is the principle of attraction by which every particle or mass of matter is bound to every other particle or mass. And these three forms of energy are not as yet understood by science. Yet the writers incline to the opinion that these two are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact which the Hermetists have held and taught for ages past. The universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermetists to be but a higher manifestation of that which is erroneously called matter. And that is to say, matter at a higher degree of vibration, and is called by them the ethereal substance. The Hermetists teach that this ethereal substance is of extreme tenuity and elasticity and pervades universal space, serving as a medium of transmission of waves of vibratory energy, such as heat, light, electricity, magnetism, etc. The teachings are that the ethereal substance is a connecting link between the forms of vibratory energy known as matter on the one hand and energy or force on the other, and also that it manifests a degree of vibration in rate and mode entirely its own. Scientists have offered the illustration of a rapidly moving wheel, top or cylinder, to show the effects of increasing rates of vibration. The illustration supposes a wheel, top or revolving cylinder, running at a low rate of speed. We will call this revolving thing the object in following out the illustration. Let us suppose the object moving slowly. It may be seen readily, but no sound of its movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments, its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. Then as the rate is increased, the note rises and in the musical scale. Then the motion being still further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then one after another, all the notes of the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, a piercing shriek dies away and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull, dark, reddish color. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter, and as the speed is increased, the red melts into an orange, and then orange melts into yellow. Then follow successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet. As the rate of speed increases, then the violet shades away and all color disappear, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object, the rays that are used in photographing and other subtle rays of light. Then begin to manifest the peculiar rays known as the X-rays, etc. As the constitution of the object changes, electricity and magnetism are emitted when the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into the countless corpuscles of which they are composed, and finally even the corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of ethereal substance. Science does not dare to follow the illustration further, but the Hermetists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation and would in turn manifest the various mental stages and then on spiritward until it would finally re-enter the all, which is absolute spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the stage of ethereal substance was reached. But otherwise, the illustration is correct inasmuch as it shows the effect of constantly increased rates and modes of vibration. It must be remembered in the above illustration that at the stages at which the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc., it is not actually resolved into those forms of energy, which are much higher in the scale, but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated in a degree from the confining influences of its molecules, atoms and corpuscles, as the case may be. These forms of energy, although much higher in the scale than matter, are imprisoned and confined in the material combinations by reason of the energies manifesting through and using material forms, but thus becoming entangled and confined in their creations of material forms, which to an extent is true of all creations. The creating force becoming involved in its creation. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will or desire or any mental state or condition are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of mind over mind, with which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted, owing to the wide dissemination of occult knowledge by the various schools, cults, and teachers along these lines at this time. So I read a lot of it because everything was so elementary, which everybody knows by now. Now, please note that this book was written around 1900 something. And so you will find in the scientific facts, they correspond to about 100-year-old scientific theories. Now, in this, because science is always growing, it is always evolving. New, better theories, they keep replacing the old ones. So you must have noticed by now that the ether is now thrown off and gravitation has a totally different explanation because of the general relativity. It was not there when this book was written. And electrical and magnetic forces, they are combined and they have the quantum mechanical description, which is much better. And many more fundamental changes have taken place in the science. So just overlook what this book is saying about the scientific thing, the details of it. The more important thing that it is saying is that just like the matter is made up of vibrations and exhibits vibration and also throws off its effect around it in space and time, same way, the mental experience is also made up of vibrations and is actually throwing out, is emanating actually the vibrations in the area around itself. So it is not in isolation. And that gives us some hint about, most of the phenomena, the mental phenomena that are unexplained. So this is the theory behind those observations of the supernatural phenomena of the mind. So it is the same thing. The only thing is the vibration is so high that the mental events are not perceived by the senses, and they are not even perceived by the instruments that are designed to detect only material vibrations. There is a big band gap between the material vibrations and the mental vibrations. So they are giving an example of a revolving object which emits sound, then heat, then light, and then different kinds of radiation, and then dissolves into energy. But it does not stop there. The energy keeps vibrating and then turns into mental substance. So they are saying that this can be taken to extreme, almost infinite frequency of vibration, rate of vibration, which is the rate of vibration of the spirit. It is so high that it is not at all visible. It cannot be detected. So it is a kind of a technical thing, but you can understand like this. And human minds, our mental experience is one kind of vibration. It is happening in the hypothetical ether, which is a holder of the vibrations, into which the vibrations happen. All the evidence must be gained from your own experiments. Just like the scientist is experimenting in the material field, and the occultist is experimenting in the mental field. So let us go forward. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration, and by an effort of will of the person or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced, just as the musical tone may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as color may be reproduced in the same way. By a knowledge of the principle of vibration as applied to mental phenomena, one may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, just gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way, he may affect the minds of others, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely the vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc. The science being that of mental transmutation, one of the branches of the hermetic art. A little reflection of what we have said will show the student that the principle of vibration underlies the wonderful phenomena of the power manifested by the masters and adepts, who are able to apparently set aside the laws of nature, but who in reality are simply using one law against another, one principle against others, and who accomplish their results by changing the vibrations of material objects or forms of energy, and thus perform what are commonly called miracles. As one of the old hermetic writers has truly said, "He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power." This is the very short chapter on vibration, but it is probably the most important one if you want to start in magic, because magic is all about changing the vibrations. If you want to have control over the material world, then you should understand the vibration and should be able to manipulate the vibrations of the material objects and manifest things from nothing. This is possible. Such kind of miracles are possible if you understand the principle of vibration. If you want to have control over others, other minds, it is also possible. You can influence the minds. You can make them miserable or you can make them happy, depending on whatever you're transmitting. And this is the art of black magic, you see, curses and so on. You can even heal the mental disorders or physical disorders, the diseases in the body, using the vibrations. This is the principle behind Reiki or healing, energetic healing, and so on. It is going to explain so many phenomena that are beyond the physical sciences. They come under the category of occult, and they are called lower occult powers for the some reason, because you see, not really spiritual still, and the egoic desires accompany this kind of powers. But if you understand vibration, if you can manipulate your own mind, like put it in higher vibrations and use the intention, then the vibrations are transmitted, and then you know from the results whether it has happened or not. So the recommended practices are perform healing, perform telepathy, perform the manifestations, and so on. Anything that is not harmful, and that has very, very less kind of karmic implications. That does not cause, total havoc, does not cause a tornado of vibrations around you, because that can cause a little bit of problems. So simple experiments should be performed, and then you will start grasping the nature of vibrations. You will start understanding them. So let us say when we astral project, what we are doing, we are actually tuning the mind to higher vibrations. And that is how we can escape this plane of lower vibration. So the vibrations, understanding of vibrations, is at the root of all the occult practices. Probably everything has importance, but this is the importance of the principle of vibrations. So the ether, or the vibration of the all, is also called Mahat in Sanskrit, Mahat, which comes from Mahatattva, which Maha means great and Tattva means substance. So the great substance, the substance of the universal mind, is nothing but vibration. And yes, everything is made up by dividing that vibration into tanmatras, which means the essential measurements in Sanskrit. So there's something similar is mentioned in Sankhya philosophy and Indian literature, that the greatest and the highest substance there is a vibration of some kind. It is called Mahat. And you can subdivide that thing and create things. So same thing, people are trying to do that, but I don't know any kind of practical things. I know I have experimented a little bit in raising the mental vibrations, but nothing on the physical plane. That is something which tantrics do. That is why we use the mantras, because the mantric sounds are nothing but vibrations, and they influence things around you. The student should find it out through experiment. The ultimate experiment is to change the vibrations of our own minds, not to meddle with the material world. It is good as it is, but you can try to increase the vibratory rate of your own mind. So the thumb rule is, it feels better. You become happier and more free if you're vibrating. If the mind is at higher vibrations, it creates more. It does not dwell in suffering and misery and negativity. If you are depressed, if you are kind of frustrated and sad and all, angry and all these things, that means the lower vibrations have taken hold. The egoic vibrations have taken hold. The thoughts are like that. And they influence everything. They influence the higher layers also. They influence the lower layers also. So, because it is all mind. So let us go forward. In the chapter 10, which is about the polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. It says a lot, actually, not only about polarity, it is making a few more statements. So it is interesting. So let's go forward. The great fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all manifested things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes which have ever perplexed the mind of men are explained by an understanding of this principle. Man has always recognized something akin to this principle and has endeavored to express it by such sayings, maxims, and aphorisms as the following. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. There is a reverse side to every shield, etc., etc. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between the things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is affected by recognition of this principle of polarity. The teachers claim that illustrations of this principle may be had on every hand, and from an examination into the real nature of anything, they begin by showing that spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. And thus the law and the laws are the two opposite poles of one thing. Likewise, principle and principles, infinite mind and finite minds. Then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that the heat and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called the cold and the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either, and you are equally correct. The higher of 2 degrees is always warmer, and the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard. All is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins. It is all a matter of higher and lower vibrations. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in an eastward direction, and you reach a point which is called west at your starting point, and you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north and you will find yourself traveling south, or vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing with many degrees between them. The musical scale is the same, starting with C. You move upwards until you reach another C, and so on. The differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative, so are noise and quiet, hard and soft. Follow the rule. Likewise, sharp and dull. Positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good, another bad, or one end good, another evil, according to the use of the terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, but that less good thing in turn is more good than the next thing below it, and so on, the more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposite to each other, entirely different, unreconcilable. When we apply the principle of polarity, we find that there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate, as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale, we find more love or less hate as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love as we descend. This being true, no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposite exist everywhere. Where you find one thing, you find its opposite, the two poles. So my comment here is that this is the old wisdom that our experience is composed of pairs of opposites. That is duality. The experience is the experience of duality. There is nothing here which is absolute in any sense. But the mind colors any experience it encounters into the poles. It colors them into this or that. So as soon as you have something, as soon as you have a quality, mental quality or physical quality, its opposite automatically comes into being, because it is an illusion, because there is one thing and the mind then colors it. The mind polarizes it into two. So let us take in the example of heat, and the mind is now going to polarize this experience of heat into hot and cold. And let us take the experience of light, and the mind polarizes into bright and dark, and so on. You see, everything is made up of poles in the physical world. It is because it is a creation of the mind. It is a division made by the mind. And on the mental plane, every kind of mental experience is actually divided into different kinds, different polarities. So there is attachment, and it comes in two flavors, love and hate. Positive attachment is love, negative attachment is hate. It is same thing, but the mind perceives it in two ways. So this is the world of polarities. This is how it should be, actually. Otherwise, there won't be any kind of experience. There will be one grayscale world there. There won't be any light and dark. There won't be any hot and cold. There won't be any like or dislike, and so on. So all the experience is created by the mind by dividing the otherwise neutral thing into polarized experience. So the thing to keep in mind here is that there are no two kinds of experiences. It is one experience appearing in two flavors, in two poles. This is the bottom line. This is the essence of the principle of polarity, that we mistake things as being absolutely this or absolutely that. It is not like this. It is all one, divided into dualities by the mind for any kind of purpose. Usually the purpose is survival only. So let us go forward. And it is this fact that enables the hermetist to transmute one mental state into another along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed. That is, may have their polarity changed. Thus love never becomes east or west or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, and likewise hate may be transformed into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull things become sharp, hot things become cold, and so on. The transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear, courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness. And likewise, the slothful man may change himself into an active, energetic individual simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the processes by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the matter is more readily understood. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same thing. A vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc. But heat may be readily transmuted into cold simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as in the phenomena of physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative, respectively. Thus, love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc., etc. And it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration, the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative and readily dominates it. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence in its manifold phases shows us that the principle may be extended so as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that the mental induction is possible, that is, that mental states may be produced by the induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. It is along this principle that the results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, and full of fear. A mental scientist, bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction. The result being that the vibrations are raised and the person polarizes toward the positive end of the scale instead toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted into courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. A knowledge of the existence of this great hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and those of the other people. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be master of his mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by his knowledge, he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently, and by the appropriate methods, change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this principle of polarity, for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many difficult subjects. So here ends the chapter on polarity, and my remark is very simple, that and the most important thing we learn when we study the mind is that it is in our hands, it is in our control to change the states of the mind. This is the greatest discovery of a student who studies the spiritual topics, spiritual subjects. Mind is one of them. This is one kind of power that less evolved person or less evolved animals, they do not have. Humans have this power to affect the polarity of the mental vibrations. So hate can be transmuted into neutral emotion, and neutral emotions can be transmuted into loving emotions. It is possible. It's possible simply by intention, simply by desire, intense desire to not be in a specific state, and the mind changes. Now it is something like magic, because many people suffer because of their inability to change their own mental vibrations. Now a magician can change, he's calling them the mental scientist. You can call them psychologist if you want, psychiatrist. There are techniques to affect other minds, but the biggest power that we have is to affect our own minds. How to do that? Check that the mind oscillates between polarities. When you do not control it, when there is no awareness there, when there is no desire to control the mind, then it is kind of wild, it is very random, it is being affected by everything that hits it. The mind is being thrown around by the situations. So once the awareness appears in the mind, you can see, that there is this hidden power there where we can affect the polarity of different events in the mind and change it to whatever state we want. So a yogi is doing that, getting hold of the mind. There is a symbolism of the bull or symbolism of a tiger. You will find the yogis are sitting on a dead tiger, skin of a tiger. Or there are goddesses that are riding the tigers. They have tamed the tigers. Or bulls. The most popular is that of metaphor of Shiva, who sits on a tiger skin, plus his pet is a bull. So that tells you a lot, isn't it? It means that he has full control over the mind. The bull or the mind, they signify the lower layers of the mind. So how to do that? First, you should understand that the mind is a kind of vibration. All the events are a vibration. It is not me. It is not I. It is an experience. So this is the first thing to understand. And the second thing is to understand is that it is changing in polarities. One emotion becomes the other. One thought becomes the other. Intelligence becomes the stupidity. Stupidity becomes the intelligence. Sometimes you're good at something, sometimes you're very, very bad at that thing, and so on. And similarly with the emotions. And it is the emotions that cause suffering. Most of the time the suffering appears as a negative emotion. So it is possible to transmute it. It is possible to change it simply by the power of intention. Having great desire to change the vibration into something positive. Because that's where the whole universe is going. You see, the whole is vibrating at the infinite rate. So it is natural that everything is attracted to that higher vibrations. So your intention then sets up mechanism of the mind in motion, and then it reverses. This can be seen very easily. So it is probably difficult when you start. So suppose you are very sad, you are very depressed. Now it is possible to turn that sadness into happiness, because they are one thing. Now it is lower in degree right now. The vibration is of lower end. So it may not be possible to turn the sadness into happiness instantly. So you can do an experiment to gradually increase the vibration. Let go of sadness. See it in an objective way. See that this is the lower vibration. Whenever sad thoughts they arise, replace them with neutral thoughts or something of this kind, that it is happening. It is an event in the mind. It is reacting to something and then dropping in vibration. And you will be able to at least change the degree of the sadness from more sad, totally miserable, to a little bit manageable. This can be tried. It is possible. It can be done actually. Then you can move the slider a little bit and change it to a neutral state. Now you're not happy, but you're also not sad. You're not crying and weeping and shouting, and your other emotions are not going wild, because sadness will not come alone. It will bring its friends, you see, anger, the frustration, this, jealousy, this and that, you see, fear, and so on, because they are all connected. So they will be invoked in the mind. One emotion brings all of them, actually. So, and then if you don't control it, the mind goes down and down and down, and like a spiral. So it is possible to get hold of one, and then if you bring it to a neutral point, the others disappear, because there is no more energy to excite the other emotions. And you see, you will find instant relief. There won't be the usual violence in the mind. And then you can start intending to be more happy. You can start doing things which make you happy. You can start talking to people who make you happy, and so on. You see, intention will give rise to certain kind of activity, also actions, which if they are mutually and reinforcing, then do that. Do not do something opposite which causes the lower vibration. That's all you need to do, and you will find that you have this power, this magical ability to change this polarity of your own mind. Now, those who have mastered this, they don't want the mind to sit at extreme poles. You see, if they are sad, they don't want the mind to become extremely happy. That is same thing, isn't it? Same thing, same event, only the sign is changed now. Instead of negative, it is positive. So they want to keep it at the zero. That is the peace, the state of peace, also called the equanimity, where it is not polarized in an extreme manner. So equanimous person is not sad, never very, very happy, is never frustrated, is never proud, is not coward, but is not very courageous. This courageousness and stupidity, the same thing. So he is at the middle. He is in equanimous state. This is where the yogi wants to be. So they are not awake and running around like mad, you see. Plus, they are not totally asleep and gone. They are in between, waking and sleeping. They are in a state of silence, you can say, where only the things that need to be done are happening. So even the thoughts do not come. When there is a need, the thoughts arise and then they go. Because thought and no thought, again, same thing. Too many, and you are at one pole, and no thought at all, gone totally. That is another pole. So equanimity, that is the goal when you are trying to operate on the vibrations of the mind. So why is it so easy to fix the mind? Why is it so easy to influence the mind? Because, you see, that is the nearest thing to the intention. If you want to change the vibrations of material stuff, like objects around you, for example, then it is more difficult, because further away from you, the intention is slowed down because of the very, very low vibrations. Now the mind cannot affect it directly. So there are tricks to do that. Is beyond my capability, actually, how to influence things. But you will find that you can influence the animals around you by being in a higher state of vibration, in a positive state of vibration. You can influence the plants. They grow quickly and they are healthy, and so on. So you can start experimenting, and as you go lower in vibrations, well, things will start showing up. The results will start showing up, the magical results. I remember something which is my experience, that there are some people, when they try to operate a very delicate electronic instrument or something, or equipment which is a high power equipment, then you will find there are some people which whenever they touch it, it goes bad. it goes faulty. It blows up. So I personally knew one such person, and I kept all my belongings away from that person, because every time my things were used, I found them broken. Everything broke down in their presence. So they need to only touch it and it's gone. You see. So I had this kind of experience, and I never understood why is that. You see. And I could not believe also, because a rational person will not believe something like this. We say, oh, it is a coincidence. But when it happens every time, then you know that something is wrong with that person. So even if they don't desire it, the bad things happen around them. So you can recall events from your own life where the material... And the thing that I noted was that person had a very, very, very bad temper and always angry, always negative in their mental attitude. So when you will find whenever there are negative people in a group, like in a company, in your team, things will go wrong, even without them doing anything. This is something common that we observe. Sometimes there are people who don't do anything at all, you see, but they are positive, and just work will get done in their presence. Something like this you will observe. So we don't pay attention to these things because we think, you see, it's all kind of coincidence is not possible because of the laws of physics. But the laws of the mind, they override the reality actually. So you will find common examples like this, and there are extraordinary examples where people heal just because, heal the diseases just because they are so positive and so on. So this chapter ends here. Just like vibrations will make you a master magician, the polarity, understanding polarity will give you a lot of control over your own life. If you need to see the essence of that which appears in two forms, and then you will grasp how to change its polarity. So most of the things, they correspond to Indian philosophies, like the polarity is the simple principle of dualism, that although everything is one, it appears in two, and that is why it appears in polar opposites, because it is created from that one. And you can see what creates, and the mind creates this kind of duality. There is actually no duality. And there is one interesting duality here, that something is true, something is false. But there is no such thing in the whole, the all. The same thing is true, same thing is false. So you will find such kind of paradoxes in the existence, because it has everything, and the mind wants to pick one thing and leave the other. The paradox arises. So that's why the opening comment, the quote from the Kybalion says that all truths are half truths. So as soon as you say this is true, you will experience exactly opposite also. So the true and false are simply polarities. The truth changes into falsehood, and the false changes into true. This is how the paradoxes happen. There are many, many paradoxes. So they are reconciled when you know the principle of polarity. Now, no more paradox, because you see the big picture. You see them as one. And so the paradox disappears. This is one use of the principle of polarity, to know things which are confusing. Because whenever there is a paradox, there is always a bigger picture, you see. Why is there a paradox? Because the mind is trying to understand half of the whole picture, and that's why it sees it as a paradox.
Pure experiences.
You were listening to Pure Experiences by Tharun Pradhan.